I talked to my therapist about this. I'm like, why?
We call them brain coaches here, by the way.
Okay. Why is it that you're not only willing to run and lose and run again, right? But why is it that you love it so much? I've come to understand it. Part of it is the extrovert in me loves that I get an excuse to meet people all around the city and learn their stories and talk to them about mine. The nerd in me loves it, right? The intellectual in me that gets to see these different problems and come up with solutions, genuinely believing that there are answers to so many of these kind of obvious, almost pedestrian problems. And then there's the one that took a little bit longer to decipher, which is the optimist in me. I would run into these rooms and run into people, and they would say, Thiru, why are you running? The city is so broken. It's never going to get better. If they give you 5 or 10 minutes, you can almost sort of see like an injection of hope going into their veins. And they walk out of the conversation being like, all right, maybe we can turn this around. Maybe this narrative that this stuff is broken and was here before I was born and therefore we need another 20 years, maybe that's all bullshit. Maybe actually there are some really obvious, smart solutions to these problems. And when you have been blessed with loving to communicate and trying really hard to communicate clearly and well, you can convince them, like a juror, like a judge, you can convince them to go from being a skeptic about the future of the city to an optimist. And that joy, it's selfish, right? But like there's an adrenaline rush out of coming up with something that makes people feel good about their city.
What would be a reasonable start to eating this elephant one bite at a time that would keep people from getting so wrapped around the entire meal that they would want to shut down and quit?
Look, I will spare you guys the long stump speech, but I will tell you there are some relatively straightforward things that you could do very quickly that would get the spin wheel turning in the right direction.
Right. And it would at least infuse some of that optimism.
Correct.
Because that's what we need.
Correct. Yep.
Some positivity and some optimism and some hope.
Yep. The problem is people don't feel safer. Even if the homicide rate has come down significantly, all of those other crimes and the failure to tell a good story around the successes has resulted in people still feeling like, I can't live in that neighborhood. That's one part of it. Cutting property taxes, and not cutting property taxes by like 1.5% over, but cutting property taxes in half, which is what they should do. Those are the kinds of public signals that you send into the market, into communities that say something's different here. I know it can be done because virtually every other American city has done it.
Especially Detroit.
Yes.
Right? There's a great story about the mayor of Detroit.
I was just going to say, and in each of these stories, it is often a small group of people with a mayor who was willing to do things that before were not done. Detroit, Washington, D.C., New York City. Rudy Giuliani, I can't defend who he has become, but he was a hell of a mayor. And New York City changed dramatically on his watch, almost single-handedly. And in Baltimore, where we have the strongest mayor model in the nation, there is no mayor in this country that has more power than the mayor of Baltimore.
Why does the mayor of Baltimore have more power?
It is structural. Literally, the mayor appoints the heads of virtually every agency. The police commissioner, the head of DOT, the members of the school board, a majority of them, controls a majority of the board of estimates. The mayor has the veto power. Those are things that other cities have diffused. And here's the part of the story that they don't tell you. And I speak very openly about race. The challenge in Baltimore is it is not white flight from the city. It is black flight. It is middle and upper middle class black families that are fleeing for the suburbs for exactly the reasons that you would predict. High crime, high property taxes, tough, terrible schools. They don't want their kids going to those schools or walking those streets any more than anyone else does from any part of the city. But they have options. So even when you look at the population increase that, current politicians are crowing about, if you break that out demographically, if you break that out by neighborhoods, the white L is becoming more dense. So the spine of the city has more people moving in. So there's, more, that's great, wonderful, no objection to it. But the black butterfly, as people refer to, that's where we're hemorrhaging people to the counties.
Speak to the white L for a second, because that's a rather local term.
Build
that out for a second for some of our out-of-town listeners.
If you look at the map of Baltimore, if you draw essentially an L, literally right down the spine of the city, and then kind of following the water to the southeast, that is where the most prosperous neighborhoods are, high density, high white population. The remainder of the city looks like a butterfly, and they refer to it as the black butterfly. In Baltimore, the white L is becoming more populous. The black butterfly is hemorrhaging people to the county.
Yeah.
And that's got to break your heart. If you think about all the assets that this city has, I mean, 2 major sports franchises, a deep water port, some of the best institutions, the best hospital in the known world, this location between the political and financial capitals of the universe, that's an extraordinary set of things to squander. I mean, when you've got all that going, Cincinnati does not have this going for it, right? Charlotte, Nashville. I mean, these cities that are finding ways to grow and define themselves and be the beacon of these specific industries, they are doing that with none of the assets I just rattled off. Nashville does not have the Ravens or the Orioles. It does not have a deep water port. It does not have a location between DC and New York. And yet they have found a way through leadership to turn that city in a really, really positive direction. There's only 2 presidents of the Harvard Law Review that have ever run for office. Barack Obama was one, and I am the second. And
well, that's a cool fact.
It's a cool fact.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
And I remember saying like everybody else was smart enough to like go become the head of a law firm or some dean of a law school. But the part of it that I actually think is true, and this is like an admission, is there is a great ambition to that, right? Barack Obama was not a slouch when he decided to run for office. When he decided not to do a Supreme Court clerkship, and he certainly could have, first black president of the Harvard Law Review, decides to go back to the south side of Chicago and starts being an organizer. That is a person who knew what he wanted to do and thought he could make a bigger difference than being the dean of a law school or the partner, the managing partner of a major law firm. I want to fix this city that has so much potential. I think that's a better end to the story I started telling you about my mom and dad coming here. Would my mom and dad be proud of me no matter what? Yes. Would they love to see that, Thiru's the managing partner of something? Sure. But when you think about that kind of extraordinary American story, I often say my sister and I didn't live the American dream. Our parents did. They're the ones that came over here with $200 in their pockets and built a life for their family. We're the beneficiaries of it. But the end of that story, I don't think is supposed to be, and then he was the managing partner of a multinational law firm. I love being a lawyer. I have had the joy of taking on a lot of really important causes and cases when others wouldn't. But at the end of the day, I can't pretend like my dream isn't still to make a difference in Baltimore.